Hey, this is Tony Wiggins with Locked On Jaguars. Major implications in the NFL brought about Brian Flores and his new lawsuit, and what implications that has about the Jacksonville Jaguars coaching search. I'll tell you right now here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, man, it's Tony Wiggins coming live from Mobile, where I am covering the Senior Bowl for the 2022 NFL Draft. And there's a lot going on, but we want to thank you first for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars, because it's your team every day, local content, and it's free on all platforms. Make sure you subscribe on the YouTube page as well as everywhere else where you get your podcasts. The Jaguars continue to be a lot of the talk here in Mobile from the people that know about what's going on. The latest you all know is that Rick Spielman is being interviewed, or has been interviewed, for a role here with the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. In some capacity, there's been rumors of the executive vice president of football operations, where he'll be in charge of everything. There's also rumors that Trent Baalke would take a role that would allow him to be closer to the field and closer to players. And now it's also opened up more discussion about who the coach is actually going to be and what direction the Jaguars will be taking. Even reports that the Jaguars have had talks with guys like Rich Bisaccia as well as Vic Fangio about coordinator positions, special teams coordinator and defense coordinator, without actually naming a head coach. So it's all pretty bizarre. And I know that some of my tweets and some of the tweets from people that cover the team may seem extremely cryptic. So we're here to basically talk about all of those things. There's no smoking gun. There's nothing like that. The smoking gun in this situation is the fact that things just they seem to keep getting weirder and weirder, more and more weird, or in fact, I'll use better terminology, but more and more weird as the days go by. Here in Mobile, I will share this with you. I had a guy who works for a team in the AFC who recognized me, and he called me by my nickname. He called me Wiggy, and that's one of the nicknames I go by, in fact. And he basically said it's a hot mess. And quite frankly, his team's in a hot mess too. But he says nothing like what you guys going on. It's almost as if he was trying to tell me that, look, at least we know what we're dealing with, and you guys don't. And he was right. A lot of the media in Jacksonville, the reason why most people are sort of dumbfounded about some of the things that are going on is because nobody knows really what's going on, because there's been nothing but silence coming from the Jaguars and their social media team or whatever. Now, I'll tell you this, that other teams are releasing information, particularly like teams like the Minnesota Vikings that are involved in the coaching staff. They're being extremely transparent. Now, what bothers the Jaguar fans about this more than anything is that during the season, and even today, there are tweets about things. And granted, social media teams are supposed to talk about positive stuff, and they're supposed to talk about things that they actually know about. And so I won't beat them up for that. But I will tell you this. When you constantly tweet obscure stuff and you constantly tweet stuff that has nothing to do with winning, when you're losing, it makes you look as if that you're being very selective with the way that you're giving out your messaging. So we've always talked about the messaging here with Jacksonville being a problem, and it continues to be a problem. You want to talk about things that have absolutely nothing to do with they aren't tangible in terms of being able to make this franchise rise from what I call football purgatory. So it just leads to more and more mystery. And then the things that I alluded to in the opening were about Rick Spielman being interviewed and whatever his role is going to be. And as we put this together with the fact that Trent Baalke was thought to be a hindrance to other coaches wanting to come to Jacksonville, and the rumors that and I don't know if the rumors are true necessarily, but I trust my sources that some coaches that were interviewed had certain um, they had certain stipulations, and one of those stipulations that they didn't really want to work with Trent Baalke. And for a lot of people out there to be thinking that it's just all smoke and mirrors, that like any coach would just take a job who's not had the opportunity to take a job before. And in this case, we're talking about Byron Leftwich and other African American coaches, that they would somehow turn down the opportunity to coach. Well, that's just not true. The bottom line is, when I discussed this yesterday, when you get a job, when you agree to take a job, your agent then steps in and says, okay, this is what we want. We want this, this, and this, and this. And um, those are the negotiations that folks talk about when they discuss whether or not a guy's going to take a job, and some of the behind the scenes things that go on. The agent is doing his job, and therefore agents will make sure that coaches understand what they make sure their ownership understands what the coaches want, what the coaches think they might need in order to succeed. Now, there's this thing that coaches won't turn down jobs, and you have seen in the past guys like Josh McDaniels not take jobs because things haven't lined up with what they want. You've seen in the past where GMs like Mr. Dodds up in Indy, where they have turned down jobs. You've seen in the past when Ozzie Newsome was the GM in Baltimore, where in the past Eric DaCosta and then Savage before him, they just decided that they were going to stay where they were in a good situation where their voice was heard, as opposed to taking anything that was offered to them. And sometimes even Ed Dodds has done it like 3 years. They've pulled their name out of consideration for certain jobs. So this myth that guys will just take jobs regardless of all of the things around them are just not true. And facts don't necessarily agree with fiction or opinions when you really do your research. So what we're going to do in this show is we're going to detail some of the things that I've been hearing, I'm going to give you some things that'll basically let you know what the temperature is amongst people who work in the NFL. And without being specific and outing folks, I will let you know in segment 2 and segment 3 exactly some of the things that I've been hearing, some of the things that I've been privy to, and some of the attitudes that surround people here in Mobile about the Jaguar situation. So I want you to buckle your seatbelts real quick. It's not going to be a roller coaster ride. It's just going to be about information. So you guys will have some information. And if the Jaguars want to refute it, they can, but they haven't actually come out and told anyone anything. And it appears to be Ringling Brothers and Bonham and Bailey Circus. And I say that because folks got a little bit offended when the fans wanted to make a clown movement and tried to actually minimize that. Well, this has been an absolute circus. So we're going to discuss those things a little bit here on Locked On Jaguars. We're going to do that in segment 2 and segment 3, and I'm going to get to that here right away so you guys can get the information, disseminate it how you want, and actually you guys are frustrated, and I understand that, and rightfully so, but I want to make sure that we do our due diligence here to get you some information, since it seems that nobody else wants to do that for you. So we'll do that in segment 2 and segment 3. Just gave you a brief outline of what the show's going to be about today, and we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues to march through the playoffs. We have one more big game that's coming up, and it'll be in about 10 days. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info. It's very, very important for you to hear that. Up to the minute, not to the day, up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline right now is available to you, and it's where the game starts. All right, I want to talk to you about some of the things and some of the events that I've incurred since I've been here. And really, I want to say for me, it's not necessarily embarrassing. It's good that people are knowing what's going on and trying to get a lot of information. And I know the fans are doing the same thing here on social media. They're trying to figure out exactly what the hell is going on with this team and this coaching search. As you know, there have been a lot of guys in and a lot of guys out. They did another second interview with Doug Peterson 33, 34 days after the initial interview. And it's almost like, where'd that come from? I'll tell you where it came from. It came from guys turning down the job. It came from guys that have chosen better situations. And it also came from people who don't want to necessarily risk their coaching future and make a mistake. Now, I'm going to tie this into something else, and it's going to be very, very important that you really, really pay attention to what I'm saying. Any coach that's not black, I'm not talking about whether or not they're qualified. That is not what I am discussing. I think there are a lot of coaches that really, really do have the dream of being an NFL coach, and they break their neck to do whatever they have to do that, and they would really do put in the work. Now, a lot of people may want to tie this into me also, in my opinions about Prime Dion, who is the coach at Jackson State. I've never had a problem with Prime being a head coach. I don't have a problem with former players being NFL head coaches. I don't have a problem with the fact that former players get on me about the fact that I've never played at a high level in football when I discuss my opinions. But those same people who play at a high level in football talk about basketball, and they talk about boxing, and they have an opinion on other things. So I'm not going to ever sugarcoat it and give you guys the impression that I'm somehow embarrassed or feel as if I'm a second fiddle, because the best I've ever done is play through high school and do some intramural stuff and have a junior college tryout in basketball. That's not the case. The case that I've made against, not necessarily against Prime, but as a counter to Prime getting a job at Jackson State is this. There are a lot of guys that dedicated their entire lives in coaching college, in coaching at HBCUs, and in coaching at other levels that could not get jobs in the NFL. Pay attention. So if they couldn't get those jobs, they went to other places to try to prove themselves, and they still have not been promoted to the NFL. There are a lot of guys in the NFL who did play the game, right, that have been career assistants in the National Football League. My only position is this. When you take a guy who doesn't have the experience, who doesn't have the longevity of actually coaching and doing the things that are required, but he has some sort of charisma and connect and of the ability to raise money. Now you give him a job. What does that say about the other people? So if Prime gets a job, or anyone else who's a high profile gets a job because they can generate certain amounts of income, what does that say about the coach at South Carolina State and other places that have done a very, very good job of doing what they're supposed to do, and they don't get a Power 5 opportunity? Now let's skip to the NFL. There are a lot of coaches in the NFL that have done the same job as their white counterparts that don't necessarily get the opportunity that they deserve. And I don't even have to name them, but I will name a couple. Denny Green won 10 games a year, 10 out of 11 years, and was fired in Minnesota. I know everyone remembers that. Jim Caldwell recently has an above 500 record as a coach, and he's now asking for a job. There are other coaches that were given 1 year, and they were canned at their job. David Culley being the latest to be a career NFL assistant, who has given his life to this profession and has not received a job. So the Jaguars interviewed Byron Leftwich, who apparently and allegedly had some stipulations as to who he wanted to be on his staff in his one and only shot. And the reason why you would make those stipulations is because you know you only got one chance. Black coaches don't get a second chance. If they did, Jim Caldwell would have a second chance. If they did, it's hard enough to get the one chance, but to get a second chance, that just does not happen. The goalpost was moved from years ago from being a coordinator on a Super Bowl winning team All of a sudden, when black coaches, and I said this last week, start to win Super Bowls as coordinators, they don't get jobs. That means the goalpost moves, right? There's one African-American coach in the National Football League. One. Brian Flores was the recent coach who had a winning record. And now he's suing the Miami Dolphins because of things that he would not comply to, things that he would not agree with that would allow him to continue to be the coach. And now the reputation of Brian Flores is all of a sudden that he's hard to work with. He's not given the same opportunity. He wasn't given the same opportunity as other coaches. But now you get a guy who had a bad reputation like Doug Peterson, and all of a sudden he's a coaching candidate. I personally think he's a good candidate. And like I said before, this is not some diatribe against non-black coaches or white coaches. But what it is this is a league that's over 70% black. There was a book written by Bill Rhoden that talked about slavery in sports. And I've always been the type of person to shy away from attaching slavery to sports because I think slavery is the worst thing that ever happened, especially for me being of African American heritage. But here's the thing. I read recently, because it's Black History Month, I read recently that when children reached a certain age, they were taken away from their families. And I try not to equate that to sports. When athletes are coming up, they're raised by their mothers, their fathers, their uncles, and their coaches. There seems to be this entitlement that they have to go to Power 5 schools. And when a guy like Travis Hunter, the number one recruit in America, goes to Jackson State, it becomes a big story. It became a big story because it's something that you're not supposed to do. And in the NFL, I feel that these kids or these young men, they're coached by African Americans, probably until they're 17 or 18. And then even in college, a lot of these staffs have African Americans. But you tell me that these kids, and I said this before, now when they get to the NFL, they can't be led by black men. They can't be led by their uncles. They can't be led by their fathers. And the NFL prides itself, quote unquote, prides themselves on diversity. We see you. There's one black coach in the NFL. And I think anybody that ignores this is living under a rock. Be very careful. I'm not saying that the coaches that are not black are not deserving. It's not what I'm saying. What I am saying to you is this. If you're going to give guys a job based on merit and not nepotism and not familiarity, I find it very hard to believe that a minority owner like Shad Khan, who owns the Black News Network, I believe that's what it's called, can really look at this situation and say that he's being fair. Now, hold him to a little bit of a higher standard because he is a minority. And I hold that same standard to other people, but I kind of think Shad would understand it a little bit. So what bothers me is that if Byron Leftwich is the guy you want, and if Byron Leftwich is a viable candidate, and if he has certain stipulations that he wants done in Jacksonville, why would you move past him and then give those stipulations to somebody who's not black? And I'm attaching it to what Brian Flores did go through in Miami. And you can read up on that. This is not a Dolphins podcast, but this is a podcast based on the Jaguars coaching search. And it is relevant because I don't think it's fair. I absolutely do not think it's fair. I don't think it's fair that a guy like Jim Caldwell can be considered boring and not exciting enough when what he does is, if he were not black, he would be just a guy who kept his head down and had a lot of character and didn't bring attention upon himself. And the reason why I bring that up is because that's what they accuse Prime of doing. And that's why he can't get a Power 5 job, because he makes things about himself. At what point do black coaches have to stop jumping through these hoops? At what point do they have to stop of figuring out where the goalpost is. At some point, what has to happen for coaches to be able to coach teams that have a majority of people that look just like them? I disagree with the stance that guys like Stephen A. Smith took about Mike Tomlin being offered a big contract to go coach in USC. The only reason I disagree with it because the stance is that why would you remove the one example, the one shining example, by the way, because I love Mike Tomlin. Why would you move the one example away from NFL owners? And the one example is Mike Tomlin. Why would you get rid of him? Because if Tomlin had taken a job at USC or wherever, someone that was allegedly trying to hire him, that would mean one less example for the white owners to see who could be successful. My only argument is this: Mike Tomlin's been there for 15 years and never had a losing season. If that ain't an example enough, then they just won't get it. This is not about an example. This is about the fact that I mentioned this earlier, that familiarity can sometimes be the devil. What do I mean by that? I'll explain it here in segment 3 of a very, very important Locked On Jaguars show as we continue to move towards finding a new coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'll tell you that and base that on a lot of things I'm hearing here while I'm in Mobile covering the Senior Bowl. First, I got to tell you about Built Bar. It's a new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. And if you're about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good and you'll want to eat it, unlike other protein bars, which can be extremely chalky, waxy, or taste like a chemical spill. Built Bars are covered in 100% chocolate, and that's enough for me right there, Jack. I don't even need to hear anything else, but I'm going to tell you that most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to any candy bar, and it doesn't even match up. I'm telling you right now. And there's more flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, which happens to be my favorite, mint brownie, and more. In fact, Built Bar is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So check out built.com often to see what is new. Listen, we got to thank you first for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars every single time, because we're free on all platforms. It's daily. It's your team every day, and we cover the Jacksonville Jaguars and all the other teams in the NFL for free. Make sure you like and subscribe the podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts on all platforms. Listen, we have to get beyond this at some point. Black coaches and players see what is going on, and what is going on is it's not an equal opportunity. First of all, they always bring up when it comes to a black candidate who's won a championship as a coordinator that they don't call plays, which is not necessarily true in every single case, because Andy Reid in Kansas City has said that Eric Bieniemy does call plays. And then they want to talk about some allegations or character. Well, if those allegations or character problems exist, you wouldn't even give certain guys an interview in the first place. By the way, some of these other guys that aren't black, they have allegations against them too. So here at the Senior Bowl, I have an executive that walked up to me that knew me, called me by my nickname, called me Wiggy, and said, "There's an absolute mess. I follow you." He says, "I follow you on Twitter. I watch your tweets. It's an absolute mess." Then there are agents that I happen to run into, and assistant coaches and people from other teams that also shook their head. And I'll be very poignant. There's one agent, I said, would you have a problem with your prospective client coming to Jacksonville? And they were like, they got to clean that up. Shad Khan needs to really, really get it together. If you own a black news network for profit, that's one thing. But if you really, really want things to change, you have to really consider, and it's not just him, it's everyone else, but I'm holding him to a different standard. And the reason I'm doing that is because he's a minority. He should understand. He should really, really understand. The last thing the NFL wants is this thing to turn into some class action suit where one of the most egregious things, if proven true, is that the owner of the Dolphins actually wanted to tank and offered $100,000. When are you going to stop offering people money, especially black people, to go against the rules and the characters and actually the laws of sports? And this is an antitrust problem also, because now you're involved with gambling, you're involved with sports books, and now you mean you're actually fixing stuff as if it's a script? Now, these are all allegations, but all I'm telling you is this. This is a pretty big deal. It'll be very interesting to me to see if the Jaguars do a U-turn and now want to offer Byron Leftwich a job. This isn't about denying anyone who has worked their butt off through the system. What people want is fairness. You can't claim that you come up from your bootstraps and you work hard and you do this, and then when other people do the exact same thing that you do, all of a sudden now the rules change. Or we're going to go in a different direction. Look at the stats. Look at the statistics. Look at the analytics. Everybody wants to use that word. Look at the analytics. Why is the league this way? And until it changes, we're going to continue to have this conversation. Nepotism, familiarity, comfort level, all of those things. Black coaches need to be afforded the exact same thing that people who aren't black are afforded, and that is a chance to succeed and a chance to fail, and then a chance to get another chance. Case in point, Rick Spielman. Rick Spielman, if he does get the Jaguars head personnel job, this will be his third time. He was a GM in Miami, he was a GM in Minnesota, and he was fired in both places. Now, I know most people don't want to hear that because they'd rather have him in place than Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke screwed up everywhere he's ever been, but he's given a shot. You want black people to be quiet? Let this stuff go away, and then you don't have to worry about people complaining about it. I'm here at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, and I'll just tell you this. If I was so closely personally attached to the Jaguar situation, which I am, but it's not just because I'm attached to the team, it's because I'm attached to the city and I'm attached to the people that come with it. For years, the narrative has been that the Jaguars fan base somehow is screwed up and they don't have the support. The Jaguars management has single-handedly done you all a favor. And what they've done is they've actually changed the opinion of people around the NFL and in the world of sports. Everyone now knows that the problem doesn't start with fans. It doesn't start with former players. It starts with management. The Jaguars need to make a serious choice. You either want to be a beacon for change, the way you were during the social justice movement, where you were the first team to march down to the police station, or do you want to be just someone who is into symbolism as opposed to doing things that are substantive? And it's not pressure to hire a black coach. That's not what it is. But it is pressure to make sure that you, as a minority owner, Shad Khan, don't fall into the same trap as everyone else, and that is the trap of familiarity and the trap of not wanting to do things that are different. I'm going to let you know about the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and Lee Sterling. If you want to wager, make sure you pay attention to that podcast, like and subscribe, and follow it, because both of those guys will give you the information that you need prior to you making wagers. We don't want you to lose no money. Jaguar fans basically have lost enough money by supporting the team that doesn't seem to want to put a winner on the field. And then I will change the tenor, and I will change the way that I talk about this team when I don't have to answer questions all day long at a place like this or the Combine about this team being incompetent. You guys continue to take care of each other. Jaguar fans hanging there. The story's not finished. We'll see if the Jaguars do what's right and do it properly and hire the people that they need to hire. Until then, you guys continue to take care of each other. I'm Tony Wiggins here with Locked On Jaguars, and I'll have more from Mobile on tomorrow.